morning, grade 5s. Happy Sunday. Happy week 12. We're pretty much nearing the end of grade 5, which is still crazy to me. But anyways, we're moving on to the next topic of our unit of geometry. We're moving on to learning of 3 different types of lines that can be created when we bring lines together. So we're looking at today's lesson, which will be 3 types of lines. All you'll need is your math notebook, a pencil, a highlighter, and that's it. You won't even need your textbook today, so that's fine. Okay, our title is 3 types of lines. Make sure your date is there. And then our I can statement is, to my notes, so I don't leave anything out. Notes are, I can identify and name the 3 different types of lines. Please highlight that. Now, the unit of geometry, it's probably, of all the units we learn in grade 5, it's the one that you really build upon in grade 6. So you really start with the fundamentals and a little bit in grade 4 and then in grade 5, and then you really build upon it in grade 6. So it's a very important unit. So write that down, highlight that. So I can identify and name the 3 different types of lines. And you have been we have looked at all different types of lines. We just haven't addressed them, we haven't named them. So you do know them, but you don't know maybe that they're the 3 different types of lines. So write that down, and then I'm going to erase this because I want to start fresh. I want to have a fresh page for each of the lines. So, thank God you can pause anytime you want, right? That's kind of the best part about this whole e-learning process. Okay, so, write this down. So the first type are parallel lines. And you've definitely heard that before. Hopefully, you should have. And today we're going to look at what that is, parallel lines. Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, let's look at the first one, parallel lines. So what that means, if something that is parallel, that means 2 lines that, and then please use your highlighter. I'm just going to change markers every time I need to. That never meet. Or I'll say, actually, let me say, never intersect. And we'll see what that means in our next topic. But actually, maybe I should have done that one first. Okay, that's fine. Slash meet, slash cross, any kind of thing that will help you memorize that. And they remain the same distance apart. Okay, so write that down. Parallel lines are any 2 lines that never intersect or meet or cross, and they remain the same distance apart. Write that down. We'll look at what that means in a moment with examples. Now, when I say intersect, that means they don't cross, right? So if you're looking at any 2 lines, so right now my 2 fingers, they're intersecting because they're crossing, right? Think like a crossroad, right? If they're parallel, they will never ever cross. They will never meet anywhere. They will never cross in this road, right? It's always parallel. That means they never touch. Let's see what that means. So, copy that down. I can erase this. So what does that look like? If I had, let's say I had line, maybe let's say I had this line. Okay? And I'll just call this line A. Actually, yeah. I'm going to call this line A. Now, I've got another line. Maybe I'll draw it over here. And I will label this B. So I've got line A and line B. Now, I will say these are parallel lines because so for example, this is my line. They're going this way. They're never going to come and cross, right? This is going to keep going, keep going, keep going. I mean, I don't have to draw, but if I kept drawing, if I had a large enough map and a large enough board here, if I kept drawing it, this would keep going, this would keep going, this would go this way. It would keep going until infinity, right? Forever, until I stop drawing, right? I run out of paper. But they're never going to cross, right? They are called parallel lines. And remember, that was first element of a parallel line. That means two lines that will never intersect because they're just going across. They're never going to cross. And the second thing is that the distance is always going to be the same. So for example, I'm going to get my ruler so I can show you what I mean. My ruler. Now I didn't measure this, but if you measured it and you did it with a ruler, the second part of a parallel line is that they remain the same distance apart. So for example, this is about 10 centimeters, okay? Yeah, this is about 10 centimeters apart. That means if I continued it, it's always going to be 10 centimeters apart, always. It's never going to be 9, because if it was 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, it'd start coming together, right? So the part of a parallel line are two lines, two or more lines, but two lines that will never intersect, right? They will never meet, they will never cross, and they always keep the same distance apart, okay? Think of it like a road. You know, when you're on the road, and you see those lines on the road. Here it's white, and I'm looking outside because there's a window. Back home it's yellow, but there's lines on the road. Those lines, so if just imagine when you're driving or your parents are driving you, and you're in one lane, right? And someone else is in the other lane. Those lanes are parallel, right? They're never going to cross, because if they cross, they're gonna get into a crash, right? Those lanes and those lines on the road are what we call parallel lines. They are never going to touch. They just keep going straight. Unless when you're in like roundabouts and whatever, right? But I mean, just a typical straight highway is just lines that keep going straight, 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 straight. And that's why I drew these dotted lines to maybe help you remember. Think of the road. Think of the lanes in a road. They will always keep going this way, and they will go this way. They'll never cross. They'll keep going straight because their goal is to not let drivers crash, okay? That is what we call parallel lines, okay? Let me repeat it one more time. Two lines that will never intersect, that means they will never cross, and they will always have the same distance. Again, think of it like our roads. They're always the same distance, right? It's not every car can fit in each lane. It's not some lanes are tinier and some lanes are really wide. It's always the same distance. Okay, that's the first type of line, that's parallel, okay? And actually, let me show you one more example. Let's see if I had a square. So that's lines, but there's also lines in a shape, right? This is a square. Now, where are the parallel lines on this shape? Where are two lines that will never cross? Okay, so look at this line right now and this line, right? So look at this line and this line. If I continued this line and continued this line, and maybe I want to go this way, right? It's the same thing. These two lines are never going to touch. This line, touch this line, but it's never going to touch this line. That's the difference, okay? Now let's look at the other two lines. And I put an arrow this way to say that these are parallel, but these two lines, and I'm putting again, remember from yesterday, last week, hatch marks? That means they're matching, right? So these two lines are parallel because if I continued going this way or continued going down, they're never going to touch and they're always going to remain the same distance apart, okay? And again, you may have learned this last year, may have not, and that's okay. So parallel lines, two lines that will always continue going, they will never cross, they will never intersect, and they will never meet, okay? And they're the same distance apart. Okay, now let's look at the second type. So copy that down, and then we can go to the second type of line, which is the opposite of a parallel line, really. So We looked at parallel lines that never cross. Now we look at intersecting lines, which do cross. So do. Okay, so what intersecting lines? Where's my, oh, I don't know where my pen went. Oh, right here. Intersecting lines are lines that meet or cross each other. Right, so like I just said, think of the opposite of a parallel line. So parallel lines never meet or cross, but intersecting lines are lines. So that's a line, right? And I put arrows to mean it's just ongoing, right? Any line that crosses it is an intersecting line. So they crossed, right? Anywhere they cross. So they happen to intersect at this point. That's an intersecting line. If I'm doing maybe like shapes, right? And I just continue drawing. Maybe I want to draw something like that. Those are intersecting lines because they crossed. Right? You see? So anywhere that two lines crossed is your intersecting lines, okay? So this point, for example, is when these two lines crossed, right? Again, anywhere two lines cross. I think that's usually always the easiest one to look at, right? Because if I'll give you a tricky one. Let me stop here. Do you think these two lines are going to eventually intersect? Do you think they're eventually going to cross? Because right now, they're not crossing. But what if I kept drawing? So I'm going to give you a trick question, right? Let's say I have stopped drawing, but if I kept drawing, do you think these two lines will be parallel or intersecting lines? If I kept drawing, make a prediction. So you know that parallel lines have to have the same distance apart. Already you can see it's kind of caving in, right? So if I kept going, what do you see notice? What do you notice? That they crossed, right? So these are in fact intersecting lines. Again, mine's not straight because I'm not using a ruler. This is why I kind of wish I was doing this on grid paper. Right? So again, any intersecting lines are lines that just cross, and they're basically two lines that come together, right? They're meeting at some point. This one example, I did this on purpose, was because right now they're not meeting, and you're probably thinking, oh, then it must be a parallel line. But that's when you need to apply your rules. Parallel lines have to be the same distance apart. And if I continue this, I know that at some point, they will cross. They will intersect. So that's not a parallel line, okay? And then the last one, so copy that down. And then let's look at the last one. And then we can do some practice. Number 3 are perpendicular lines. And this is a very important type of a line because it really helps, like I said, for the grade 6 lessons that you will be learning. So this is, okay, yes, let me get a different marker. Perpendicular line is one horizontal and one vertical line intersect to create a right angle. And this is very important. Right angle. So one horizontal line, one vertical line come together to create what we call a right angle. So copy that down and I'll tell you what that means. So let's say I've got this line, right? That's one line. And I've got another line here. Now, they've intersected over here, correct? That was from our last lesson. So already you can say, oh, this is an intersecting line. And you're probably thinking that, well, Miss Mavish, you just taught us the second type of line, which is intersecting. So isn't this just an intersecting line? And it's a trick question. So yes, it is an intersecting line, but it's a specific type of line that is intersecting. Whenever two lines cross and they create this, what we call a 90-degree angle, right? A perfect L. Think of it as a perfect L. And that we call is 90-degree angle, right angle. Okay? So, and I'll review that in a second. So, anytime you have a perfect L shape, right? And I still have my cube here from last week. So this, anytime you have a perfect L, that's called a right angle. Think of when you put, maybe if I put, I don't fit in the frame, but if I put my arms up and it's a perfect L, I've created a right angle, which is 90 degrees. Now again, like I said, you're not going to be talking about degrees and angles until a little bit much later, but in grade 6. But this is kind of like your warm up, and you may already know some of it, and that's great too. But for grade 5, all you do need to know is one angle, which is 90-degree angle, which is a perfect L. Okay. So for example, and it doesn't always have to be. Let me write this down and let me do some more examples with you. So if I've got, again, it doesn't always have to be just like perfectly written. If I've got this, I can do it on an angle, because sometimes students get confused on an angle, and that's an X. So I haven't gotten it perfectly, but that's an X. And again, if I look over, that yes, this is in fact a perfect L. That would be a 90-degree angle, which would make it a perpendicular line. Now, compare this to what if I did this? And you'll say, well, Miss Fabish, that looks like an L. Is that perpendicular or intersecting? They intersect, right? But this is a wonky L. I want a perfect L. That is a 90-degree angle, right? Or I could do it a backwards L. That's a 90-degree angle, right? I could do it this way. That's a 90-degree angle. It doesn't matter where they intersect, but it's anywhere that there is a perfect L. Whether you throw around the L, but these are all 90-degree angles, and these will all be perpendicular lines. Okay? And let's write that down actually. Let's write this over here. Let me erase this non-example. And let me just say a right angle. And please write this down. This is important. Right angle is a corner that is 90 degrees, right? Degrees as in like when we do Fahrenheit in degrees. And I'll put in brackets, a perfect L. It's just like a perfect little L. Again, doesn't matter which side, but it's a perfect L some shape or form. That's a perpendicular line. And perpendicular lines, like you probably realize, is dual, right? They're intersecting lines that create a 90-degree angles. Not every intersecting line will be, right? Remember the example that I did? Some, they just intersect. They just cross kind of like at an angle. But some of them cross so perfectly that they create these L sides. Then they're perpendicular. Okay, so 3 types of lines. One, the first one we did, which were parallel lines. So 2 lines that will never cross, and they're always the same distance apart. Good example for that is think of the roads, think of the lines on the roads. Okay? Second example, we looked at intersecting lines. So 2 lines that will cross, right? They do cross somewhere at some angle. And when those intersecting lines are special and they cross so perfectly that they create an L, a perfect L or a 90-degree or right angle, we call them perpendicular lines. Okay, so 3 different types of lines. I'm going to post some extra practice, not extra, but some practice for you to go through and learn these 3 different types of lines on our Edmodo folder. So go to your Edmodo folder as soon as you finish this, check out those practice questions, and then message if you have any questions, okay?